Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and tonight we are talking about navigating fan fiction. It's that strange new world out there that offers all kinds of exciting options. But first, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Lynn.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Zubernis. I'm a clinical psychologist and a professor at Westchester University. And one of the things that I study is the psychology of being a fan and all the wonderful things that come with that, including expressing yourself and creativity, which includes fan fiction. I've written a bunch of books on Supernatural, including 2 that I wrote with the cast of Supernatural. There'll be Peace When You Are Done, which is hanging out over me, and Family Don't End with Blood.
Very good. Karen?
I'm Karen Millett, and I've been a fan for probably about a year or so. I'm on my 5th rewatch. I really love this show. I tried to write fan fiction for it, but I don't think I'm very good at it, but I love reading it, and I hope to be able to write some.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all my modern day worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk right into and feel right at home. I started writing fan fiction in high school back in the 1970s, and it was for Star Trek back then, the original series. And we didn't have the internet, so we would go to a convention and we would have these paper copies of our typed stories, not even printed out, typed. And we would sit around the perimeter of somebody's hotel room and read one and pass it down and read one and pass it down. So we've come a long way since then, but the thrill is still there. And before we start, I want to make one important distinction, just in case anybody out there listening to this is confused. Fan fiction is written by fans out of the love of fandom, but it is unofficial and it cannot be sold for profit. It doesn't, because the rights still belong to the publisher or the owner of the intellectual property. That is different from tie-in fiction, where the owner of the rights does a contract with a professional author to pay them to write a story in the continuing world of whatever series or book this is. The author does not hold the rights to that story. It's work for hire. They get paid, they walk away. But that is, they're two completely different things. So just distinguishing that, we're talking about the one that is written for love, not money. So Lynn, how did you discover fan fiction?
I discovered fan fiction when I fell in love with a film and went online in the very, very new internet in around the year 1999 or something, and found that there were people writing stories in the universe of this film, to my great surprise and great joy. And I just was sort of like, oh my God, this is great. There's people writing about my favorite characters. And then decided to try it myself and waded in and wrote some. And actually, the internet was new and it was a very small community. And I mean, it wasn't even that big and popular a film. So I was really impressed too with the fact that the fanfic writing community was a real community. I met some wonderful friends that I still know today and I'm still friends with today, many, many years later, just from me reading their fan fiction or them reading my fan fiction and then corresponding. So that was my introduction. It was a very positive introduction.
Okay. Karen?
Well, I've written fan fiction before high school, and that was quite a while ago. I did it because I wasn't very good at school, and I didn't have many friends, and I hid in the library a lot. So just writing just became normal, and I had a favorite show that I found I fell in love with one of the characters, and I just wrote and wrote and wrote. And after a while, I give it up. But then when I discovered Supernatural, I just I fell in love with Sam so much that I thought I'd want to try again.
Okay. Well, I mentioned that my first love was Star Trek, the original series. And back then, if you went to a convention, and there were conventions, they just weren't nearly on the scale or professionalism of what we have now. One of the things that you could buy were fanzines. And these were usually mimeographed or badly copied, pretty much homemade copies of a bunch of fanfic stories that somebody had put together and was selling in the vendor room to kind of cover the cost of the photocopying. But it was, again, before the internet. This is how you got anything at all. So when the internet, and then I went away from it for a while, and like many published authors, I learned that I could write and entertain people by writing fan fiction. That was kind of my way of finding out that, yeah, this whole writing thing might work. And then I got busy with, job, kids, family, writing books, and then I got back into fan fiction with Supernatural. And at this point, I am a reader, not a writer, because I don't have time to write extra stuff. But there sure is an awful lot of great stories out there. And I have an umpteen long list of things I want to read. And I hope I live long enough to get to the end of the list because I keep adding to it. Um, but yeah, that's kind of how I got into it and got back into it. Lynn, you've seen a lot of changes, not just in the internet coming online itself, but I think you were around in the live journal days, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was my introduction, not to fan fiction, because my introduction to fan fiction was predated social media. So it was, just web rings and things like that. That's how I
Right.
discovered fan fiction, and forums after that. But then I discovered LiveJournal when I fell in love with Supernatural. My friend Kathy and I sort of fell in love with it together and decided we would look for, are there other fans, and discovered LiveJournal, which we hadn't known anything about. It was a really unique platform in the early days of Supernatural. It was where most of the fan fiction was posted, but it was very different from now. Most fan fiction is posted on Archive of Our Own, which is an archive, but LiveJournal was a social media platform where everyone had their own personal journal. So you posted your fan fiction in your personal journal, and then other people who discovered you would then comment on your fiction, and you'd have a lot of back and forth conversation in the body of people's stories. You would tell them what you liked about it, or you would give them constructive criticism, and you'd go back and forth talking about it. And it was I became really interested in it academically with my professor or psychologist hat on, because I really saw how therapeutic it could be for people. I used to call it like self narrative therapy. Narrative therapy is when, as a psychologist or a therapist, you kind of help somebody rewrite their life story so it works better for them. And it really seemed like people are kind of doing that through their fan fiction. They weren't writing about themselves, so they had this nice projective distance. They were writing about Sam, Dean, Cass, whoever. But they were writing about issues that were real to them, that they were sort of working through. And it sort of became almost like a group therapy in LiveJournal, because somebody posted their story or a chapter of their story, and then the group, the rest of the fandom, came in and gave feedback. And many times people would say, oh my God, I can so relate to this, something similar happened to me. And it was a very therapeutic kind of thing. And because LiveJournal the communities were very protected, only the people who you were friends with would be coming in to comment on your story. So you didn't have a whole lot of people who maybe disagreed with who you were writing about or what you were writing about. So it was very supportive, very different platform and more protected than Archive of Our Own. Anybody who's a registered member of the archive, or sometimes even not, can just comment. So you see comments from people who say, "Oh my God, that's disgusting. How could you write about this?" Or comments that are less than therapeutic, I would imagine, for the person who's posting. So my introduction was a little bit utopian coming in through LiveJournal, and it is a little bit different today. But I still think for a lot of people, writing fan fiction is therapeutic in a bunch of different ways.
Okay. Karen?
Yeah, it is. I found writing fan fiction or even writing my own books, you can hide there, and it's kind of hard to explain. I just felt safe and secure writing fan fiction, and even I don't know if it still exists now, but I used to post it on fanfiction.net.
Mm-hmm.
I used to post it there, and I'd get a lot of comments, and I would feel good about it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I got away from it because I wrote my own books, and then I just got back into it, and I really enjoy it. It's relaxing, and you're in a world of your own, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, and truth be told, anybody who writes fiction and writes published fiction books usually has a great deal of themselves hidden in that story one way or the other. It's how we do ongoing therapy. And a lot of times if you know the person, you can go, I can see what you did there. Or my husband will read one of my drafts and go, do we need to talk about something? It looks like you're working through something. Now, other people who don't know you that well just accept parts of the story, but that tends to influence the kind of stories we choose to tell, is something that we can really relate to, or something that's bothering us. And so we work it out via the characters working out something similar. So, yes, I think it is very healing and very therapeutic, especially in a warm and supportive community. Um, and I think it's the community aspect, especially with supernatural fan fiction and supernatural as a whole, is just such a special thing. Lynn, you want to say anything about community?
Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about when people ask me, why I study fandom and why I'm sort of a crusader for kind of the healthy parts of fandom. That's one of the big benefits. I think in our culture, in our society, the way it is, we've gotten very fragmented, and people
Mm-hmm.
are often not as close in their physical communities anymore. People may not know their neighbors. People may need to move around a lot because of work and economics. People's family may not live anywhere near them. So we don't have sometimes the community that we did 100 years ago or 200 years ago, or honestly even 30 years ago. There's not that many, meet down at the local pub to see all the neighbors anymore. So, and people really need community. It's a basic human psychological need that we have to have a sense of belongingness. We have to feel like we belong to some kind of a group, or else we sort of feel profoundly anxious because, back in the day, a long, long time ago, if you didn't belong to a group, you probably were going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. So we don't like that feeling of not belonging, and we look for that community. And fandom is a great way to find it. And many people find it interacting around the creativity that happens in a fandom, whether it's writing fan fiction or making fan art or creating videos. There's a tremendous encouragement of creativity in fandom, which makes it a community that draws a lot of people in and gives them something to talk about. So it helps people develop those bonds.
Mm-hmm. Karen?
Yeah, it does. Like the stories I'm trying to write now. Well, I don't know if I'm really good at fan fiction like I used to be, but I find when I'm writing, I just get lost.
Mhm.
I feel safer, secure, and talking with people online about Supernatural. People are so nice and supportive and will talk back and it's a great fandom, and I enjoy writing about it. And I find with the books I'm writing, I find I take elements of Supernatural for my characters,
Mhm.
like their strengths, their weaknesses, and things like that.
Yeah. And I think the Supernatural family, as we often refer to it, is a very special part of this fandom. Now, other fandoms have close-knit groups, and um, there are usually many groups within a fandom. But I think Supernatural overall has done well at having a very supportive group, and thanks to Jared's openness about his struggles, been very psychologically supportive and very good at recognizing some of the psychological issues underlying fandom and people's need to connect. So for a show about two guys who hunt monsters, it gets some amazingly deep. But I think the one of the other things that I love about fan fiction is you can read fan fiction that remains in the fairly canonical supernatural universe, kind of like additional seasons or extra episodes in the different seasons, and stay within um, that framework. Or if you ever wanted to see what Sam and Dean would be like as firefighters or as soldiers or as, marine biologists, there's a fan fiction for that. Probably a whole section. And I think that's so creative. And it also, um, you know, recognizes, then there's also RPF, real people fiction, which is where they're writing ostensibly about Jared and Jensen, not just Sam and Dean. And it gets kind of wild. Lynn, what do you think about the kind of line between fan fiction about the characters and then spilling over into RPF?
I mean, I think it's fine. It's interesting though, because there's been an evolution that has kind of gone like this, in terms of how acceptable it is within a fandom to write about the real people. When I first discovered the supernatural fandom, it was really frowned upon, and the fandom that I came from, also, it was really frowned upon. It was seen as, it's fine to write about the characters. They're fictional people. They're never going to know. You can't hurt their feelings. You can mischaracterize them. Who cares? They're not real. But maybe you better not write about the real people, because theoretically they could read it and have their feelings hurt, or it's looked at as just not an okay thing to do. And then there was an evolution over time. I mean, I remember in the beginning thinking, oh yeah, that's not cool. Like, I could never do that. I can't write about, these are real people. That's invasive. And then over time, it became much more accepted to do that. And I also evolved in, my original, oh, that maybe that's not okay, to, no, it's fine. I remember having a conversation with Eric Kripke about real person fan fiction, with Jared, Jensen, Misha, and his question immediately was, "Oh, is there any with me?" And I said, "Well, yeah, we've read a couple with you." And he was immediately like, "Can you send it to me?" And we were sort of like, "Oh my God, you're okay with that?" And he was like, "Look, I incorporate real people into my fiction. I just wrote Samuel Colt into Supernatural. That's the same thing. I'm doing the same thing. Fiction is fiction, and fiction is great." So all the people involved with Supernatural, especially, which are the only people I've really talked to about it, were so okay with it that I also evolved in my thinking of, yeah, that's right. You're just really writing about characters. You don't know Jared or Jensen or Misha or Eric Kripke. You're just writing about somebody with that name who has that physical appearance, who has that job, and then you're making it up from there. So, I think it's okay. But weirdly, the fandom, and this is across fandoms, fandom in general went in the, it was more expansive and more okay with a lot of things, and now has really narrowed back in again so that people seem more judgmental about, no, you can't do that, no, you can't write about this, no, you can't write about that, which I think really takes away from some of the benefit of fan fiction in being something that is just done for people to express
Mhm.
their imagination and their fantasy and their creativity, which is really healthy for people. Like, people write about all kinds of things in fiction and fantasy that they would not do in real life. If you're writing about Hannibal, you're not going to close your laptop and then go out and cannibalize someone. Like, there's no there's no association there. And I think it's interesting that, and a little disappointing that fandom has become a little more limiting and more judgmental and critical sometimes about that, including writing about real people. I do think I am still very uncomfortable with, like, writing about people's children.
Yeah.
So writing about minors who are real people, I think is a little bit different, because those people are not on television or asking for any kind of exposure.
Okay. Karen?
Oh, I've never thought of writing about real people. Like, I kind of just stick to fictional, and I stick within canon if I can. But I'm not comfortable writing about Jared or Jensen or Misha like that, because it's I just thought it's just, you don't write about the real people, you just write about the characters that they play. I'm content that way. But I see them in the show, like she said, with Samuel Colt and those real people, but I never think of doing things like that. But with my fiction, I have Dean as a police officer, or Sam as a robber, kind of thing like that. I
Mhm.
feel more comfortable with putting them in different roles.
Okay, but leaving them Sam and Dean, not Jared and
Yeah,
Jen.
yeah.
You know, I've seen con clips where Jensen has talked about fan fiction that he's become aware of, or that somebody showed him, which I think is just a little bold. But they know it's out there. They've certainly seen it. They laugh about it. I think they take it extremely well. Um, I I fell in love with Sam and Dean Winchester. So that's my favorite of the fictions out there. But I have read some very good alternate universe, not only alternate universe supernatural, but alternate universe, like I said, Jared and Jensen as firefighters, or Jared and Jensen as astronauts. And they are they're retaining important parts of the Sam and Dean characters with some embellishment. But like you said, Lynn, the authors don't know the actors to make them true to the real person. It's just our impression of who the real person is, shaped by the characters. Um, and it's very true that even in original fiction, you take inspiration from things that really happen. I draw a lot from legends and lore and history. And while I might file the VIN numbers off of the history or the lore and change the names, if you're familiar with that branch of information, you're going to go, I see where you got that. And that's just part of writing and the creative process, is to take inspiration from what has come before. Um, let's see. Oh, I did want to mention that fan fiction is part of the broader supernatural fandom, where you've got costuming and, like Lynn mentioned, videos and conventions and um, music. And I think it is wonderful that this show about a couple of guys hunting monsters has turned into such a global family with all these different outpourings of creativity for the fans to participate in and not just be static watchers from a distance. And that makes a big difference, is feeling like you are part of the process and not just the audience. Thoughts about that, Lynn?
Yeah, no, I think that's a big part. And I think that's a big part of why Supernatural stayed on the air for as long as it did, because its fandom did become so cohesive and was such an and is such an incredibly creative group of people. And I think it has sustained the fandom. Supernatural's been off the air for more than 5 years, and the fandom is still very much around, and new fan fiction is being posted all the time, and fan art and videos, and there's like a dozen conventions a year. So I think that high level of creativity that this fandom has had from the very beginning has really helped keep the show and the characters kind of alive and keep the fandom alive. And I think too, I mean, you just mentioned kind of the supportiveness of the actors and the creators. I think that's part of it too. I mean, from the very beginning, they were not threatened by fandom's creativity. Instead, they were like, well, that's unusual. We didn't know about that. But hey, I mean, Jared and Jensen have said so many times, whatever floats your boat. Like that's their way of the like I that might not float my boat, but if that floats your boat, like go ahead and do it. And I think their okayness with it from the very beginning, and Kripke's okayness with it, and his, encouragement, he would say, the more people that come to play in my sandbox, the better. And he's right. Like that welcoming of that creativity and that encouraging of it, that's part of why this fandom is still here and still going strong. And we're having this conversation in 2026 about a show that's been off the air so long.
Mm-hmm. Karen?
Yeah, it's I'm impressed with the fandom. Like, I mean, I didn't see it when it originally aired. I didn't discover it till I saw clips on YouTube about it, and then when I first saw the first episode, it's like, oh, I got to see this. And then I got into the fandom and got into talking in groups with people and reading fan fiction, and it's just I can't believe like how long it really did last. I didn't expect it to go past a few years, but 15 years later, and all these people still love it, and the fiction pictures, it's just it's remarkable.
Well, we even had an episode of the show called fan fiction. So, and Supernatural could get so meta, but there was the acknowledgement right there that we know you're out there. Wink, wink, nod, nod. And I think that was a lot of fun. I have seen other fandoms where the creators or the copyright owners tried to shut things down and stop things. And A, it didn't usually really work that well. And B, it kills the fandom, because now it's very clear that you're not really wanted. They don't want a relationship, just watch what they put in front of you. And it was really bad for the fandom. So I think part of the reason the enthusiasm and the love for Supernatural, aside from it just being a good show and the cast being terrific at what they do, is that there is a sense of interaction, that we're not just the audience, we're participants at a certain level, and that's fulfilling.
Yeah, I think it's also, Supernatural is a very smart show. It's a well written, smartly written show. And I think it attracted a lot of smart people, because some of the fan fiction that I have read in the Supernatural fandom, I'm sorry, I would stack that up against any published fiction in
Oh,
Barnes and
absolutely.
Noble 100 times over. So I think it was also due to the quality of the show attracting its complexity, the complexity of its characters and its themes attracted I saw people come over from the fandoms that I'd been in before. The very best writers in those fandoms were the ones that came over to Supernatural. So
Hmm.
I think also it helped that there were just so many brilliant writers and artists and vid makers, like all of the creative people who flocked to the fandom because of the quality of the show really made it just, if you look at the stats on AO3, even today, you've got fan fiction with Sam Dean cast, like the main characters of Supernatural, in the top 100 in 2026. People are still fascinated by them and writing about them, and it's good. A lot of it is really, really good.
Yeah. Karen?
Yeah, and I think the way Jared and Jensen were Sam and Dean, the the way that they acted, the way that they molded those characters, you know, people really were are still attracted to them.
Hmm.
They're strong, powerful characters, and I think a lot of fan fiction and stuff look to them for how to develop their characters more like that on the show.
Hmm. Well, they're not only strong and vulnerable, but they're also strong and powerful, but they're also vulnerable. They're vulnerable with each other. These are two guys who, fight demons, but they're not afraid to show affection, and they are not afraid to show emotion. And that brings so much more resonance to the show and then echoes in the fan fiction. But like what Lynn was saying, oh yeah, absolutely. I have read fan fiction that was better than some stuff I paid money for at the store.
Oh, yeah.
And you can find everything from drabbles that might be a couple hundred words to some that are over 100,000 words, multiple chapters, sometimes um, almost multiple books in the same series of fan fiction. So there are really some very hardworking, talented people who are bringing terrific stuff to share with the fandom, and there's a vulnerability as well as a pride to say, look what I made. Here, let's share it together. And that's a wonderful thing as a creator, whether you're doing it with a published book or a fan fiction or a video or, that sharing element, even though reading tends to be a very singular private thing, that sharing of the stories is very communal. And that's one of the wonderful things about all of this is that you're having a bad day, you can go in and throw a blanket over your head and read a fan fiction in the privacy of your closet if you want. But you can also come back out and interact on the comments and go, wow, that was what I really needed to read, and have people, say, oh, that's great. I'm glad I could help you today.
Yeah, I think there's a sort of another kind of therapeutic aspect to fan fiction that you kind of just touched on, Gail. Fandom is a gift economy, which is so unusual in the rest of our culture that is mostly run on money and I'll give you this if you give me that. Fan fiction is, I'm going to spend possibly months and months and months writing this thing. And my only expectation is maybe someone will read it. I'm not asking for money. I'm not, I'm doing this out of the love of the show and the characters and as a service to my fellow fans. And I'm just putting it out there. And the fact that it's done that way makes it singularly uncontaminated. You're published writers, I'm a published writer. It's great to write published things, but you're working with a publisher and you're working with an editor, and there's a lot of constraints on what you're doing. When you're writing fan fiction, you are writing what you want to write, and it has a purity to it, an unfetteredness to it that makes it really healthy as fantasy. And sometimes people, it's nice to be able to write that. It's also nice to be able to read that unfettered, tap into your imagination. Sometimes it's darker than what would be published. Sometimes it's more sexual than what might be published. And it's helpful for that to be out there for people to be able to access. That's good for people to be able to tap into those fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Karen?
Yeah, yeah. Because like I've got one book published, and I just finished another one, and I just had to take a break from it and try my hand in fan fiction. Just to, I like darker stuff sometimes, and then sometimes I might like a little humor. But I find when I'm working, when I wrote my first book, it was just, you know, I had a specific way I wanted everything. But when I'm writing fan fiction, it just feels like you can do whatever you want more,
Mm-hmm.
more
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the characters are already there. You're not making up your own characters. Those are already there, and you can just draw on them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it's also interesting when you have the characters and their stories pass through so many hands and so many different people's vision. Sometimes you're reading a story and you're saying, wow, I never thought about that with Sam or Dean. That actually holds very true. That may not have come out in the show, but yeah, that seems like that would be something that they would think or do or deal with or have to reconcile. Um, and so I think that filtered through all the writers and fans' experiences and perceptions, we get almost a deeper, richer experience with fandom and the stories. Um, Not better, but different. Um, so it definitely brings value, I think, to the fandom. Well, folks, we have blown through our time already, having too much fun. So before we go, let me just give everybody a chance to say where people can find you online, and if you have a new, recent, or upcoming book, tell us about it. Lynn?
You can find me on all social media at Fangasm SPN. You can find the books that I've written with the Supernatural actors with their take on what it was like to be on Supernatural and interact with the fandom at peacewhenyouaredone.com. I do have a new book coming out in 2027 in a series called TV Matters, which has a volume on the most influential television shows. So, of course, there's a volume on Supernatural, and I'm writing that one with a colleague, Erin Giannini.
Cool. Karen?
Well, I just have an author page on Facebook. I have one book published through Amazon. It's called The Strong Man Survives, and I'm just finishing up a second book, which I hope to get published soon too.
Okay. And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. If you spell those right, you'll find me on all the major social media sites. I've got one Morgan Bryce book that is a shifter male-male romance that just came out, Necessities. And coming out at the end of August is Glow, which is my contribution in the Legends multi-author series, but it is monster romance. So what would Sam and Dean think? Anyhow. Thank you so much for being wonderful panelists, and thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up soon on Continual, so we'll see you online.